All right, let's talk about this episode of Family Guy, Season 23, Episode 14. You know, the whole opening theme song thing with the good old-fashioned values and all that jazz. It's always a bit of a wink and a nudge, isn't it? Like they know they're peddling chaos and absurdity, but they're going to give you that nostalgic song anyway. And you know what? It works. It sets a tone. But this time, it feels like they were really leaning into that good old-fashioned values thing, just to completely shatter it. Especially when you consider that this episode aired back in March of 2024. Remember March 2024? It was right in the thick of that whole, well, let's just say a lot of unconventional life choices were being discussed in the news. People were really debating what was normal and what wasn't. And here's Family Guy dropping an episode that's basically a masterclass in defying expectations and embracing whatever the heck makes you happy. It's like they saw all the real-world hand-wringing and said, hold my beer, we're going to show you what truly living your truth looks like. And honestly, the sheer audacity of it all is what keeps you hooked. This episode does some wild stuff, but what I'm absolutely dying to talk about is how they managed to turn a simple bed and breakfast trip into an existential crisis for Peter, and frankly, a full-blown self-discovery journey for Lois, which then spirals into something nobody saw coming. It's a lot, so buckle up because we're diving deep into this one. And hey, if you're enjoying this breakdown, do me a favor and smash that subscribe button. It helps keep these deep dives coming, and honestly, who wouldn't want more Family Guy analysis in their life? Now, let's get into it. This episode, on the surface, is about Quahog holding a charity auction, and the Griffins are trying to snag some goodies. Lois desperately wants her old VCR back, which, let's be honest, is peak Lois, wanting something sentimental over something actually useful. Peter, being Peter, messes it up, of course. Meanwhile, Lois wins a romantic getaway to a bed and breakfast, and you just know this is going to be a disaster waiting to happen. The episode is really about Lois's journey to reclaim her own life and desires. She's tired of being the caretaker, the one who always puts everyone else first, and she decides she's had enough. It's a bold move for her, and the show really goes there with it. It's not just a quick plot point, it's the engine driving a huge chunk of the story. The writing here is surprisingly cohesive for Family Guy, which can sometimes feel like a collection of sketches stitched together. The main plot of Lois wanting to live her truth and the subplots like Chris's, well, situation, and the various character interactions all seem to feed into this central theme of self-discovery and breaking free from expectations. It's not just about jokes, it's exploring these characters' desires, even the uncomfortable ones. This episode feels like a turning point for Lois. Usually she's the exasperated wife, the voice of reason amidst the chaos. But here, she's the one causing the chaos in a way, by finally prioritizing herself. It's a refreshing change of pace and honestly makes her more interesting. The pacing is mostly good. It sets up Lois's frustration early on, gives her that moment of clarity with the exact change at the grocery store, a brilliantly mundane catalyst for something so huge, and then lets the story unfold. There are a few moments that feel a little rushed, especially the way the VCR auction wraps up, but the emotional arc of Lois is so strong that it carries the episode. Visually, it's standard Family Guy fare, but there are some great reaction shots and character animations that really sell the comedic and dramatic beats. The directors clearly knew where the heart of the story was. My personal verdict? This episode is a surprisingly deep dive into female sexuality and self-fulfillment, masked as a typical Family Guy absurdity fest. It's not just funny, it's actually got something to say, which for this show is a huge win. It's definitely one of the stronger, more thought-provoking episodes of this season, and it leaves you with a lot to chew on. It's not a perfect episode, mind you. There are always those classic Family Guy moments that feel a bit too much or too little, but the core message and Lois's development make it stand out. It's an episode that earns its runtime and then some, pushing boundaries in ways that are both hilarious and, dare I say, progressive for the show. The way it tackles a woman's sexual awakening and her right to pursue happiness, even if it upends everyone else's lives, is pretty daring. It's the kind of episode that makes you reevaluate the characters you thought you knew. Let's get into some of the moments that really stuck with me. First off, the whole exact change at the grocery store moment. Lois is at the register, dealing with all the usual Family Guy chaos, and she has to pay for something. Then, out of nowhere, she counts out exact change, down to the penny. It's a moment of pure mundane triumph, and she treats it like winning the lottery. This isn't just a random gag. This is the spark. This is the moment she realizes that if she can achieve something so small and specific with such perfect precision, Maybe she can achieve bigger, more personal goals. It's her sign. It's that little aha that sets her on this path of saying yes to everything, which, of course, is a very dangerous phrase in the Family Guy universe. What makes it work is the sheer absurdity of it. For a show that's usually about explosions and outlandish scenarios, this hyper-realistic, almost pathetic moment of success becomes the catalyst for a massive life change. It's brilliant writing. What it's trying to say is that sometimes the biggest epiphanies come from the smallest, most unexpected places. It's about finding that one moment of control or success and using it as a jumping-off point. My alternative? Honestly, this moment is pretty perfect. It's the contrast that makes it shine. But maybe, just maybe, have the cashier be incredibly disappointed that she got it right, like they wanted to make her dig for more change. That would add another layer of Family Guy absurdity. But yeah, personally, I loved this. It felt earned in a weird, twisted way. It's the calm before the storm, and it makes Lois's subsequent actions feel even more justified. Then there's the whole VCR situation. Peter is bidding on Lois's old VCR, the one with her precious Lawnmower Man tape still inside. Lois is trying to stop him, and this whole bidding war happens. It's classic Peter being oblivious and selfish. He's bidding on something sentimental to Lois, not because he cares, but because he wants to win. And then the reveal that Lois wins it, but only because Peter loses the silent auction for it. It's a beautiful, messy loop of Family Guy logic. It's funny because it's so typical. Peter's a dog chasing his tail, and Lois, despite all her frustrations, still gets what she wants in the end. Sort of. It shows the complex, often frustrating relationship dynamics. It's a reminder that even in all the craziness, there are these little threads of affection and possessiveness. My alternative? Maybe have Peter actually win the silent auction for the VCR, only to realize it's broken or he has no way to play it. That would be peak Peter. But this way, where Lois wins and gets her tape back, it feels like a small victory for her, which is important.
Personally, I found the whole exchange frustratingly real. That's the magic of Family Guy. It can be so over the top and then suddenly hit you with a moment of relatable marital annoyance. The VCR moment transitions nicely into the reveal of Peter's butler. Yes, Peter has a butler. On vacation. Because of course he does. And this butler, who he only brought along just in case Peter Mayhew dies, is present when the news of the actor's passing breaks. This is peak Family Guy absurdity. It's a joke that's so layered, so specific, and so utterly bizarre that it somehow lands. The idea that Peter would have a contingency plan for the death of a beloved actor and then have that contingency plan be fulfilled during the vacation is just chef's kiss. It's a commentary on death, preparedness, and Peter's general lack of emotional intelligence. It's also a dark, dark joke about celebrity. The butler's stoic acceptance of his role, despite its morbid premise, is what makes it. He's just doing his job, even if that job is morbidly specific. The underlying commentary is about how we sometimes prepare for the worst in the most ridiculous ways, and how life can throw curveballs that make those preparations ironically relevant. My alternative? Honestly, this joke is so out there, it's hard to improve. But maybe the butler could be incredibly mournful about Peter Mayhew's passing, making Peter even more oblivious to the tragedy. That adds a layer of dark comedy. Personally, I think this joke is a prime example of Family Guy at its most audacious and clever. It's the kind of joke that makes you laugh and then immediately think, did I really just hear that? Then we get to the infamous VCR tape moment and Chris's visual. Lois is finally going to have her romantic getaway, and she walks in on Chris. Not just Chris, but Chris in a very personal situation. And the whole door locking mechanism in the house is apparently set up for maximum comedic effect because Lois can't get out. And Chris's reaction is just pure, unadulterated teenage embarrassment. This is where the episode really starts to unpack the women don't pleasure themselves trope. Lois is disgusted, but Chris is just mortified. The gag is the shock value, of course, but it also sets up this whole conversation about female sexuality and societal expectations. It's a bold choice, and the writers really commit to the awkwardness. It's funny because it's so cringe, and the visual of Lois's face is priceless.
It's also a stark contrast to Lois's own awakening that's about to happen. What it's saying is that even in a family full of weirdos, some things are still considered taboo, and the embarrassment is real. My alternative? Maybe have Lois accidentally walk in on Peter doing something equally embarrassing, and then they can bond over their mutual shame. But no, this works. This is a classic Family Guy shocker that leads to something more. Personally, I found it hilarious and uncomfortable in equal measure. It's the kind of scene you can't unsee, and that's the point. This leads into the conversation between Lois and Meg. Meg, ever the voice of reason and also the recipient of much of Lois's frustration, basically tells Lois she needs to take care of herself. She points out the double standard. Boys can do whatever they want, but girls are expected to be pure and innocent. Meg's advice is surprisingly enlightened, especially considering her usual characterization. She talks about masturbation education class and the dark propaganda they used to show kids. It's a clever way to frame the societal conditioning that prevents women from exploring their own sexuality. Meg is essentially saying, Lois, you're allowed to enjoy yourself, and it's not a sin. The writers are using Meg to deliver a very progressive message, which is an interesting choice. It's funny because of the contrast between Meg's usual underachiever status and this insightful, almost feminist advice. It's also sad because it highlights how much women are taught to suppress their own desires. What it's really exploring is the ingrained societal shame around female sexuality and how even our education system can be used to perpetuate harmful ideas. Meg is the unlikely guru here. My alternative? Maybe have Meg give Lois a much more outlandish, unhelpful piece of advice, and Lois has to figure out the good parts herself. But this direct approach works well for the episode's theme. Personally, I was impressed by Meg's surprisingly mature take. It felt like a moment where she finally got to be the wise one. The episode then shifts focus to Lois's personal journey of self-discovery. She's taking care of herself, and the family is noticing. They're all starving, and Lois is just enjoying her newfound freedom. Peter's cluelessness is on full display, and then Lois drops the bomb. She's been on a journey with her body and spirit, and she's dating Bonnie. This is the absolute bombshell. The fact that Lois, the perpetually put-upon wife, is not only exploring her own desires, but is also in a relationship with her friend Bonnie, it's wild.
It's the culmination of her say yes to everything mantra, and it's a complete subversion of expectations. The show doesn't shy away from it. The family's reactions are priceless, and the way Joe reacts to Peter's explanation is pure gold. Peter's excuse that Joe didn't please his wife is just wow. It's a bold statement about relationships, freedom, and the idea that sometimes people just grow in different directions. The writers are really pushing the envelope here, exploring themes of female sexuality and non-traditional relationships in a way that's both shocking and, for some, empowering. What it's really saying is that happiness can be found in unexpected places, and that people have the right to pursue their own truths, even if it's unconventional. It's a massive commentary on societal norms. My alternative? I'd love to see the immediate aftermath of that announcement. What happens at the next family dinner? Does Bonnie actually come over for Thanksgiving? But for this episode, the shock value and the implications are enough. Personally, I was floored. This is the kind of plot twist that defines an episode, and it did not disappoint. And then we have the whole BBC's Football This Morning segment. This is pure satire. It's mocking the way certain media outlets fetishize athletes, especially those of color, by focusing on superficial aspects like their accents and their personal lives. The soft focus shots, the overly enthusiastic narration, the emphasis on them speaking the Queen's English, it's all designed to highlight how ridiculous and objectifying it can be. The specific examples, like here's one eating crisps or here's one in his flat, are just absurdly mundane details presented as if they're incredibly sexy. It's a sharp critique of sports media and its tendency to sexualize and exoticize athletes, particularly black athletes. It's funny because it's so on the nose. You can see the real-world parallels immediately. What it's saying is that media often reduces people to stereotypes and superficial traits, especially when it comes to race and sports. It's a commentary on how we consume and fetishize talent. My alternative? Maybe have them show a clip of a footballer doing something genuinely impressive, and the narration still frames it in a sexualized way. But this current version is pretty strong on its own. Personally, I found this segment to be a perfect example of Family Guy's ability to tackle social issues with a darkly comedic edge. It's smart, it's relevant, and it's undeniably funny. Now let's talk about the character Heat Check. Lois Griffin. This is her episode. She goes from the put-upon wife to a woman embracing her own desires and sexuality. Her moment of triumph with the exact change is a brilliant small detail that fuels her massive shift. She's not just the nag, she's a woman finally living her truth. Her best moment is her declaration to the family, but her entire arc is the standout. this episode really changes how I see her. She's not just Peter's wife, she's a person with her own needs and desires that she's finally going to fulfill. It shows where the show could be going with its older characters, giving them genuine growth. Peter Griffin. Peter is Peter, mostly. He's the obstacle, the oblivious husband, the one who doesn't understand what's happening. His reactions to Lois's new life are classic Peter, a mix of confusion, selfish annoyance, and a bizarre attempt to understand it through his own warped lens. His comment about Joe not pleasing his wife is a hilariously stupid attempt to rationalize the situation. His worst moment is probably his continued cluelessness, even when faced with the reality of Lois and Bonnie. He's used to fill space and provide the expected Family Guy absurdity, but he's not the focus here. His role in this episode shows the show's continued reliance on his established character, even when a different character is driving the narrative. Chris Griffin. Chris's accidental walk-in on his own activities is a central gag that fuels a lot of the initial awkwardness. It's a classic Family Guy shocker, and his embarrassment is palpable. His reaction to his mom and his explanation to Meg about why boys do things like that show his immaturity. He's used for the initial comedic shock, and then to contrast with Lois's own awakening. His role here highlights the ongoing immaturity of the younger Griffin kids, which is a recurring theme. Meg Griffin. Meg is surprisingly crucial here. She's the one who gives Lois the advice and encouragement to explore her own sexuality. Her past experiences with masturbation ed class are a clever callback that explains her perspective. It's a huge moment for her character to be the one dispensing wisdom. Her best moment is definitely giving Lois the push she needs. This episode elevates Meg, showing her with a surprisingly insightful and progressive outlook. It makes you wonder if the writers are trying to do something different with her.
Bonnie's role expands significantly as she becomes Lois's partner. Their shared journey and eventual announcement is the episode's biggest twist. Her initial interaction with Lois Mabar and their shared realization about female sexuality is a great scene. Her partnership with Lois is the most unexpected and impactful development. This development is a huge shift for Bonnie, previously defined by her own marital struggles. Joe is mostly reacting to the chaos. His initial shock and then his attempt to understand the situation through Peter's ridiculous logic is a key comedic beat. He's the straight man to Peter's silliness, and his reactions are predictably funny. He's used to highlight the societal norms that are being challenged by Lois and Bonnie. Let's dive into some of the hidden gems and Easter eggs that you might have missed. First, that old VCR Lois is so desperate to get back. It's not just any old VCR. It's a symbol of her past, her memories, and a connection to a time when life felt simpler, or at least more manageable. The fact that her precious Lawnmower Man tape is still in there is a specific, quirky detail that makes her attachment feel more personal. This isn't just a generic item, it's tied to a specific piece of pop culture, and likely a specific memory for her. It's a callback to a time when VHS was king, and physical media held more sentimental value. Then there's the reference to masturbation ed class in Meg's advice to Lois. This is a darkly humorous invention by the writers, playing on the idea that schools, in their attempts to educate, can sometimes be more harmful than helpful, or at least incredibly awkward and ineffective. The specific story of Samantha, who thought she might begin to know her body, instead she got to know her grave, is a perfect example of this over-the-top cautionary tale that would likely leave young people more scared than informed. It's a jab at sex education that's more about fear-mongering than actual guidance. The VCR butler who was hired just in case Peter Mayhew dies is a masterclass in specific morbid foreshadowing. Peter Mayhew, the actor who played Chewbacca, passed away in 2019. The episode aired in 2024, so this is a bit of a dark and timely, or perhaps untimely, reference. The idea that Peter would have a butler on standby for the specific death of a celebrity and then have that butler be useful for, well, something related to that death during a vacation is pure Family Guy.
It's a joke that requires you to know a bit of pop culture history and appreciate dark humor. The brief cameo of BBC's Football this morning is a very niche but sharp piece of satire. The show is poking fun at how certain sports media outlets can be overly sensational and sexualizing, particularly when focusing on athletes of color. The focus on biracial footballers with British accents and the mundane details presented as exciting is a dig at that kind of shallow, fetishistic reporting. It's a clever way to comment on media bias and the objectification of athletes. The numerous celebrity name puns like Denzel yourself short, out of my depth here, and learn to live with the Bardem are classic Family Guy wordplay.
These are the kinds of jokes that reward attentive viewers who appreciate puns and pop culture references. They're quick, clever, and often go by in a flash, but they add a layer of linguistic fun to the dialogue. They show the writer's dedication to cramming as many jokes as possible into every scene. Finally, the mundane vocation for the bed and breakfast trip Lois and Bonnie take. This sounds like a made-up, slightly gross-sounding place, which is typical for Family Guy's invented locales. It's the kind of name that evokes a certain image, maybe a bit damp, a bit dreary, but quaint enough to be believable as a destination for a getaway. It adds to the realism of Lois's desire for a break, but with that signature Family Guy twist that makes it sound just a little off. What if they did it differently? Let's consider the ending. Lois announces she's dating Bonnie, and the family is shocked. Peter, in his typical fashion, tries to rationalize it by saying Joe didn't please his wife. This is a bold ending, but what if it went even further? What if instead of just announcing the relationship, Lois and Bonnie actually staged a grand, public display of affection at that moment? Imagine them kissing passionately in front of everyone, leaving the family absolutely speechless. That would have amplified the shock factor and really driven home Lois's commitment to her newfound truth. It's a riskier move, and perhaps too much for even Family Guy, but it would have been an unforgettable mic drop. Another point of divergence could be Chris's situation. Instead of just being embarrassed, what if Chris was actually proud of his self-discovery? What if he saw it as a positive step, and his embarrassment was more about his mom walking in on a private moment, not the act itself?
This would have mirrored Lois's own journey of self-acceptance more directly and shown a different kind of growth for Chris. He could have said something like, "Yeah, Mom, I'm exploring my body. What's the big deal?" That would have been a truly surprising and progressive moment for him. And what about Peter's reaction to the butler? The butler is there because Peter Mayhew might die. What if, after Peter Mayhew's actual death, the butler remained in Peter's employ, and Peter started treating him like a morbid good luck charm? Like, "Oh, the butler is here, so the world is safe for another day." This would have leaned into Peter's complete lack of understanding of grief and consequence, and the butler's passive acceptance of his bizarre role could have become a running gag throughout the season, adding a layer of dark, absurd continuity. All right, let's talk about the final verdict. I'm giving this episode a solid 8.1 out of 10. Why 8.1 and not a clean 8 or 9? Because the ambition of this episode is staggering, and it mostly pulls it off, but there are still those few classic Family Guy missteps that keep it from true perfection. The exploration of Lois's sexuality and her journey towards self-fulfillment is incredibly well handled and surprisingly nuanced. The way they made a mundane moment like finding exact change the catalyst for such a monumental shift was brilliant. Lois as a character for this episode was at her sharpest, most self-aware, and most empowering. The sheer audacity of the Lois and Bonnie storyline is what earns those extra decimal points. It's not just a shock value gag, it feels like a genuine, albeit wild, character evolution. This episode is definitely for the viewers who appreciate Family Guy's more adult, more boundary-pushing humor, and for those who enjoy seeing characters evolve. If you're looking for a typical, plot-driven episode with predictable gags, this might feel a bit too left field. But if you like Family Guy when it's brave, when it's a little bit provocative, and when it actually has something to say about relationships and societal expectations, then you'll likely love this. It's an episode that respects its audience enough to tackle complex themes with a comedic lens. What would have pushed the score higher? Honestly, a slightly more fleshed-out exploration of the fallout from Lois and Bonnie's announcement would have been incredible. While the shock is great, seeing the immediate family dynamics and how Peter and Joe truly cope with their wives exploring this new path would have added another layer. Imagine a whole episode dedicated to the awkwardness, the confusion, and the eventual grudging acceptance. That could have been legendary. This episode, with its wild premise and its surprisingly progressive themes, feels like a direct response to the hand-wringing and societal debates that were happening around its air date. It's Family Guy saying, "You think things are complicated? Let us show you complicated, and let's have a laugh about it." It opened with that classic theme song, promising old-fashioned values, and then delivered an episode that completely flipped that on its head, proving that sometimes the most traditional setup can lead to the most unconventional and liberating outcomes. And that, my friends, is Family Guy at its absolute finest.